So imagine you're standing in front of a man who, well, he basically just defies the laws of nature.
Right.
You watch as bullets just kind of pass through his body like whispers. You see him swallow this lethal dose of poison without even flinching.
Yeah, it's completely wild.
And then you watch him get tied up and thrown into a freezing, icy river. And it's like the ice itself refuses to claim him. I mean, it sounds exactly like the origin story of a comic book villain.
Oh, absolutely. It's totally cinematic.
But today's deep dive is actually about deconstructing that exact myth. We've got our hands on this really fascinating stack of historical notes and excerpts from the book, The Unextinguishable Shadow, The Legend of Grigori Rasputin.
Yes, great source material.
And our mission today is to figure out the actual truth behind the ghost story. Like, how does a barefoot, completely uneducated guy from a frozen, super remote village become, arguably, the single most feared shadow behind a global empire?
It's a truly remarkable ascent. And to really grasp how it happened, you kind of have to strip away the magic, right? You have to lose the supernatural folklore.
Right, get down to the reality of it.
Exactly, because when you peel back the layers of the whole Rasputin myth, what you're actually left with is this profound, almost textbook case study in intense human psychology.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we're really looking at the mechanics of deep, paralyzing fear and how that specific emotion acted as the key that essentially unlocked the heavily guarded doors of the Russian imperial palace to this complete and total outsider.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because the transition from the myth we all know to the actual historical man arriving in St. Petersburg is it's super jarring.
It really is night and day.
Yeah, the source text describes him stepping into the grand halls of Russia like a storm no one saw coming. And I think we really need to sit with the contrast of his arrival for a second.
For sure. Set the scene.
We are talking about the inner sanctum of Tsar Nicholas II. The Romanov dynasty at this time is like the absolute glittering pinnacle of the elite.
The 1% of the 1%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking Fabergé eggs, literal gold leaf walls, and this court of nobles who operate on the strictest social protocols in the world. And then in walks Rasputin.
Right.
He's wearing these dirty peasant robes. He literally smells like the road. He has this wild, unkempt gaze. And a voice that the text actually notes brings both strange comfort and deep unease.
Yeah, quite the presence.
And initially, the nobles just laughed at him. They thought, here's a peasant playing dress up as a holy man.
Right. And in any conventional socio-political climate, I mean, that laughter would just be the end of his story.
You'd just kick him out.
Exactly. The Imperial Guard would escort him off the premises immediately, and he'd just be this brief, amusing anecdote for the aristocracy at their next dinner party.
Yeah.
I mean, the security apparatus of the Russian Empire was designed specifically to keep people exactly like him thousands of miles away from the Tsar.
And that is exactly what I keep bumping up against reading this. It's like, okay, it's like an average guy off the street showing up to a high-stakes corporate boardroom.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Kind of with the massive mahogany table, the billionaires in the custom suits, private security at every single door. And you just walk in wearing muddy work boots, smelling like you've been sleeping outside, and you start screaming at the CEO about how to run their company.
Right. Security is going to physically remove you in about 5 seconds.
Exactly. They will laugh right up until the exact moment they realize the building is actively on fire and you're somehow the only person holding the blueprints to the exit.
Yeah, well put.
Which kind of makes me push back on how he ever got his foot in the door in the first place. The absolute highest echelon of society does not just let a visibly unhinged outsider bypass the front gate, let alone literally walk into the private bedrooms of the royal family. How did those protocols fail so spectacularly?
Well, what's fascinating here is a really specific observation from the text. It says, laughter has a way of dying quickly when desperation enters the room.
Oh, wow.
That psychological dynamic right there is the entire engine of his rise. Social hierarchies, background checks, security measures, those are all luxuries of a stable environment.
Right, when things are going well.
Exactly. They completely collapse under the crushing weight of utter desperation. I mean, you simply do not ask for credentials when you are in a state of absolute existential crisis.
You don't care about a resume if you're drowning.
Exactly. Rasputin didn't need a polished resume or a fabricated noble title. He just needed the environment inside that palace to be desperate enough to try literally anything.
And according to these excerpts, that desperation wasn't just, abstract political anxiety about the state of the country. It was deeply personal, physical, and highly localized right inside the palace walls.
Very localized.
I want you, listening to this right now, to just put yourself in those shoes for a second. Imagine you're a desperate parent watching your child suffer. It's the worst nightmare.
Right. How far would you go? Who would you be willing to trust if all the conventional wisdom, all the world-renowned experts, and literally all the money on Earth were completely failing to save your kid?
And the crisis was terrifyingly specific. The heir to the throne, Alexei, suffered from hemophilia.
Which is a blood condition, right?
It's a condition where the blood doesn't clot properly. So this meant that a simple bruise, a minor scrape, it could easily become a life-threatening event.
Wow.
The text describes the boy bleeding internally in ways that no doctor in the entire empire could figure out how to stop.
And the Empress, Alexandra Feodorovna, is described as experiencing a total psychological collapse. And honestly, it makes complete sense.
Completely.
Every single drop of her son's blood wasn't just a medical emergency for a terrified mother. It felt like the literal end of an entire 300-year-old dynasty.
Yes, the stakes were unimaginably high.
She is watching the future of the empire slowly slip away. And the most highly trained, highly paid doctors in the world are standing around her bedroom completely helpless. Well, and we have to look at what medical science actually looked like at the time to understand the gravity of this failure. The doctors weren't just helpless. They were actively, if unknowingly, making the situation worse.
Wait, really? How?
So, in the early 20th century, a common, cutting-edge treatment for pain and inflammation was a relatively new drug called aspirin.
Oh, no. Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. We know today that aspirin is an anticoagulant. It thins the blood.
Oh, my God.
So the top medical minds of Russia were likely administering a drug that actively prevented the boy's blood from clotting, inadvertently exacerbating the trauma.
That is horrifying.
It was a catastrophic feedback loop in that room. The doctors are terrified because their treatments are failing the Empress.
Right.
The Empress is terrified because her son is actively deteriorating. And the boy's terrified because he's surrounded by panicked adults poking and prodding him.
Which spikes his blood pressure.
Exactly. It spikes his blood pressure and forces his heart to pump blood even faster through his unclotting veins.
So the very people brought in to save him are physiologically accelerating his decline through their own panic and, ignorance of the drug.
That is the exact mechanism of the crisis.
Right.
And then enter Rasputin. He inserts himself into that escalating spiral. And notice what the text emphasizes about his intervention.
Right, he doesn't bring medicine?
No, he didn't bring advanced surgical techniques or some mystical herbal poultice. He brought calm.
Just calm.
He demanded the frantic doctors leave the room. He sat by the boy, he prayed, and he spoke in a low, soothing voice.
And the boy actually improved? I was reading that and trying to figure out the trick, but it's actually deeper logical when you look at the biology.
It really is.
Was his real magic simply offering a massive placebo of calm? I mean, by kicking out the frantic doctors, he stopped the administration of the blood-thinning aspirin.
Yes.
And by speaking softly, he naturally lowered the boy's heart rate and blood pressure, which allowed the body's natural, albeit super weak, clotting mechanisms a chance to finally work.
Spot on. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, psychologically speaking, he didn't just treat the boy's bleeding. He treated the Empress's overwhelming terror.
Right, she needed an anchor.
Exactly. He walked into a room where everyone was emotionally drowning, and he became the one completely solid, unbothered object. He became her absolute emotional anchor.
And I imagine once you establish yourself as this singular emotional anchor for a woman holding that level of imperial power, especially when it comes to the survival of her child, you are practically untouchable. The gratitude must have been just blinding.
Absolutely blinding. I mean, he went from a wandering mystic to an untouchable savior, literally overnight. He cured the panic, the boy stabilized, and that established a bond of trust that no politician, no noble, nobody could ever break.
But that trust is what completely mutated his role in the empire, right? He stops being the weird guy who prays over the kid in the nursery, and he morphs into this inescapable political force.
He really does.
The text refers to him as a shadow behind the throne, whispering in royal decisions, weighing in on who should be appointed to high-level cabinet positions. And here is where the contradictions of his reign become just wild. The hypocrisy is glaring.
Well, the contradictions practically become the currency of his power.
Seriously.
Yeah.
We read about his behavior, And the rumors and the facts are just entirely blended together at this point. The source notes that he drank heavily publicly. He was involved in these open, scandalous affairs.
Yes, very well documented.
Yet he would turn around and speak of God as if they had just grabbed coffee together. High society women flocked to him seeking spiritual purification, while the men in the government were utterly terrified of him.
He was a deeply polarizing figure, and he's operating in a society that demanded very strict moral optics from its leaders, yet he flagrantly, almost deliberately, ignored those optics.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. It is the ultimate rules for thee but not for me scenario.
Definitely.
It's like a famous wellness guru who makes millions lecturing you on bodily purity and clean living, and then you catch them chain smoking behind a dumpster.
Yeah, perfect comparison.
You would assume the open sinning, the extreme drunkenness, the public scandals, you'd think that would instantly shatter his image as a holy man to the Empress. But it didn't.
It didn't even put a dent in it.
She refused to hear a single word against him. Meanwhile, the context outside the palace walls is shifting dramatically. World War I is tearing through the continent. Millions of Russian soldiers are dying on the front lines. The supply chains are collapsing, and St. Petersburg is literally starving.
It was a horrific time for the general public.
And so anger is boiling over, and the public starts accusing Rasputin of poisoning the royal family, not with a literal potion, but with his influence.
And the societal backdrop is crucial here.
I'm really struggling to reconcile this, though. I look at this guy, the drinking, the wild behavior, the total lack of formal education, and I just don't buy that he was some Machiavellian mastermind pulling the geopolitical strings of the Russian Empire.
Right, he wasn't exactly a statesman.
No. To me, he looks like a guy on a massive bender who got incredibly lucky by calming a sick kid and then found himself way out of his depth. Was his political power actually that absolute, or am I missing something about how the public viewed him?
This raises an important question about how societies function under extreme, prolonged duress. The text asserts a very powerful idea here. It says, legends are not born from peace, they are born from fear.
Born from fear, okay.
So to address your skepticism, you are likely correct that his actual day-to-day policy influence was highly exaggerated. He wasn't sitting there drafting complex agricultural policies. But we have to look at the mechanics of a scapegoat.
How so? Like, why him?
Well, when a nation is starving and a brutal war is ravaging the countryside, the public consciousness needs a face for their suffering. The Russian people largely viewed the Tsar as divinely appointed.
Right, the Tsar is chosen by God.
Exactly. So to blame Nicholas II directly was to fracture their entire worldview. You can't punch abstract concepts like failing geopolitical strategy or logistical supply chain collapse.
You need a villain.
You need a villain. Rasputin, with his dirty robes, his wild eyes, his well-documented debauchery, and his inexplicable, mysterious hold over the Empress, he represented the perfect physical embodiment of a corrupted system.
Wow. He was basically the walking, breathing malware in what was supposed to be a divine system.
Exactly. It completely shielded the monarchy from blame in the eyes of the public. If the Tsar was making bad decisions, well, it wasn't because the Tsar was incompetent. It was because the dark mystic was whispering poison into his ear.
I see.
So whether his actual political influence over daily operations was 10% or 90% ultimately didn't matter. The perception of his dark spell over the royals was absolute reality to the starving public.
And if the streets believe the influence is a poison, that anger is eventually going to reach a boiling point.
Inevitably.
If the public is ready to revolt because of this one man, the elites inside the palace aren't just embarrassed by him anymore. They are in actual physical danger.
Their survival instincts kick in.
Right. The nobles realize that if they don't cut this perceived rock out of the empire, the people will literally tear the entire palace down, which inevitably forces a plot to eliminate him.
Yes.
But the assassination attempt that follows, I mean, it defies belief. It's where the history completely detaches from reality and just becomes pure myth.
It really is one of the most bizarre and heavily scrutinized nights in modern history.
So let's break down the mechanics of what the source text says actually happened. A group of wealthy, privileged nobles invite him to a palace late at night under the guise of a social visit.
A trap.
A total trap. They lay out a spread of cakes and wine heavily laced with cyanide, the kind of dosage that is chemically designed to stop a human heart almost instantly.
Right.
Rasputin sits down, he eats the cakes, he drinks the wine, and he doesn't die. He just continues talking.
We have to analyze the psychological state of the assassins in that very moment.
Mm,
I mean, these are men of high society. They are not hardened killers.
not at all.
They're watching a man consume enough poison to kill several people, and he is just asking for more wine. The cognitive dissonance, the sheer panic that must have been flooding their nervous systems, it would have been blinding.
But why didn't the poison work? I mean, was it supernatural?
Well, modern historians and toxicologists suggest a few very grounded theories. Some believe the cyanide might have degraded due to improper storage.
Okay, that makes sense.
Others suggest that the immense amount of sugar in the cakes could have actually chemically inhibited the absorption of the poison.
Oh, interesting.
There's even a theory that the supplier, knowing the high stakes, lost their nerve and sold the nobles harmless powder instead of real cyanide. But, to the terrified nobles in that room, chemistry and human error didn't cross their minds.
They saw a demon.
They saw a demon.
So their carefully laid plan falls apart, and they move to blunt force. One of the nobles pulls a revolver and shoots him in the chest. He collapses. The nobles think the nightmare is finally over.
Right.
They leave the room to catch their breath and, steady their shaking hands. But when they return to check the body, Rasputin's eyes snap open. He leaps up, grabs his attacker, and actually manages to flee out into the snowy courtyard.
Which triggers an absolute collapse of any remaining composure among the assassins.
It's pure physiological chaos. They chase him into the snow. More shots are fired. He's beaten. The text says he seemed physically impossible to end. Finally, they manage to bind him, and they drag his body to the Malaya Nevka River.
Yeah.
They hack a hole in the frozen surface and throw him into the freezing depths, hoping the ice will finish what the poison and the bullets somehow couldn't.
I really want to contrast the physical realities of the two parties here rather than just looking at the action. You have the assassins who are absolutely flooded with cortisol.
Shaking, probably.
Exactly. Their hands are shaking, their fine motor skills are completely gone because they are experiencing a massive adrenaline dump that they have never been trained to handle.
Right.
On the other side, you have Rasputin, a hardened, physically robust man from the Siberian wilderness who is suddenly thrust into the ultimate fight-or-flight survival mode.
Oh, that is a brilliant point. The nobles aren't fighting a ghost. They are trying to kill a desperate, adrenaline-filled animal fighting for its life, and their panicked aim is terrible.
Exactly. Their terror distorted their perception. Did he shrug off fatal bullets, or were their shots wild and non-lethal in the dark?
Probably the latter.
Right. Did he possess supernatural strength, or was it the raw biological power of a man refusing to die? Their own panicked accounts heavily exaggerated his invincibility. They essentially wrote the legend using the ink of their own fear.
So what does this all mean? It plays out exactly like the final act of a slasher movie. The monster takes everything you throw at him and just keeps getting up.
Yes, the classic trope.
But the source text gives us an autopsy twist that completely grounds this entire supernatural ghost story in horrifying reality.
It does.
When his body was finally pulled from the ice days later, they found something incredibly grim. He didn't die from the cyanide. He didn't die from the gunshot wounds to his chest.
Don't.
They found water in his lungs. He drowned.
Yeah.
He was alive when he hit the water. He didn't magically dissolve into the ether. He fought against his bonds under the freezing ice to his absolute last breath until his lungs gave out. It strips away the magic and leaves you with the brutal, violent reality of human survival.
It really does, but it also highlights the profound irony of the assassination.
The ultimate irony. The nobles' entire objective was to secretly kill a man in order to eliminate a myth. They wanted to prove to the Russian people that he was just a mortal peasant, get rid of him, and save the reputation of the empire. But their botched, panicked, incredibly messy execution is the exact mechanism that made his myth immortal. By failing so spectacularly to kill him cleanly, they handed the public the ultimate proof that he really was a dark wizard.
They manufactured the very monster they were trying to slay.
And that brutal reality is why the legend refuses to fade. The source text distills it down perfectly. He became a question that no one can answer. Even reading through these excerpts, you find yourself bouncing back and forth.
Constantly.
Was he a genuine healer who stumbled into a position of power and got corrupted by it? Or was he a master manipulator from day one who saw an opening with a desperate mother?
Right.
Is he a symbol of how powerful enduring faith can be? Or is he the ultimate historical warning sign of influence gone horribly wrong?
He operates as a mirror. People project their own fears and biases onto him, depending on the angle of the light you view him in.
And I think that brings it directly back to you, listening to this right now. Rasputin's story isn't just a dusty piece of Russian history. It is a profound, incredibly relevant reminder of how quickly logic, reason, and social protocols can be entirely bypassed when fear takes the wheel.
Very true.
It shows us, clear as day, that in times of deep uncertainty, whether it's an unprecedented medical crisis in your own family or a massive political upheaval in your country, people will latch on to absolutely anyone who projects total confidence.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how strange their methods are, how dirty their background is, or how contradictory their actions might be. If they can offer a sense of calm when everyone else in the room is panicking, people will literally hand them the keys to the kingdom.
It is a really sobering reflection on human nature. We like to think we are driven by logic, but, well, we're often driven by whoever can lower our heart rate.
Yeah.
And looking at the text we've explored today, I want to leave you with one final lingering thread to pull on. We just analyzed how the messy, frantic assassination physically cemented his legend. But consider the alternative.
What do you mean?
What if those terrified nobles hadn't decided to assassinate him in such a spectacular, violent, and theatrical way?
Oh.
What if they had simply managed to exile him back to his village in Siberia? Or just waited for the war to end? Would Rasputin's dark magic have eventually just fizzled out as the empire modernized?
That's a great point.
By dragging him to a palace, attempting to poison him, shooting him in the dark, and throwing his still-breathing body into a freezing river? By trying so violently to extinguish the shadow, did his killers actually ensure that the shadow would burn forever?
A shadow that bullets supposedly pass through like whispers and the icy waters refuse to claim? It really does make you wonder who created the monster in the end.